Of January 9, 2023, the gentlewoman from Connecticut, Mrs. Hayes, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and to submit extraneous materials into the record on the topic of this special order.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you to my colleagues who have joined me for this extremely important SNAP Special Order Hour. Hunger continues to be a pervasive issue in America. According to the USDA, in 2023, over 42 million people rely on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP, and 41% of those households have children. SNAP benefits are modest, averaging only about $6.20 per person per day, or about $2 per person per meal. SNAP benefits average only $6.20 per person per day, or about $2 per person per meal. The benefits of SNAP are highly targeted to focus on those with the greatest needs. 92% of SNAP benefits go to households with income below the poverty line, and 54% go to households at or below half of the poverty line. Additionally, every dollar spent on SNAP benefits generates as much as $1.54 to the local economy. House Republicans are putting forward a farm bill which would end the USDA's authority to increase the Thrifty Food Plan. The Thrifty Food Plan is used to determine the amount of benefits a SNAP recipient receives. USDA calculates the Thrifty Food Plan using a mathematical model based on the cost of food, the nutrients in the food, nutrition guidance, and what Americans are actually eating. The Thrifty Food Plan goes further than a simple adjustment for inflation to better ensure that people have access to food. The 2018 bipartisan farm bill directed USDA to regularly reevaluate the Thrifty Food Plan and SNAP benefit adjustments as food prices, dietary guidance, and other scientific standards shifted over time. The farm bill put forth by House Republicans would result in roughly $30 billion in benefit cuts, according to the Congressional Budget Office. That would impact every SNAP household in future years, including children, older adults, and people with disabilities. It would mean that the cost of the Thrifty Food Plan would be frozen, no matter what the science says about the cost of a healthy, normal diet. In the last 50 years, the Thrifty Food Plan has only been updated 3 times, in 1983, 1989, and 2006. But these updates did not increase SNAP benefits. As a result of the 2021 update, the benefits amounts were increased and the purchasing power of the plan to 21%. This led to $1.40 per person per day increase in SNAP's average benefits, or about 70 cents per meal. This is not a lot of money to begin with. However, this update lifted over 2 million SNAP participants out of poverty, or above the poverty line, including over 1 million children. According to the Urban Institute, the 2021 Thrifty Food Plan reduced poverty for Black and Hispanic people, suggesting that reevaluation was addressing long-standing systemic racial issues. Additionally, a 2023 Data for Progress poll found that 66% have a favorable view of SNAP, including 83% of Democrats, 62% of independents, and 52% of Republicans. All Americans benefit from this anti-hunger program. A majority of Americans support increasing funding for SNAP, not cutting it. The total cut to SNAP and related nutrition programs under the House Republican proposal is roughly $30 billion. The average per-person SNAP benefit would be roughly $7 less per month between 2027 and 2031, and jump to $15 less per month in 2032 and 2033. According to the budget and policy priorities, this cut would affect nearly 6 million older adults, 4 million people with disability, and nearly 17 million children, including 5 million children under the age of 5. Hunger is a policy choice, And SNAP is our most effective anti-hunger program, and we must protect the Thrifty Food Plan in the Farm Bill. Thank you. Additionally, I would like to submit 4 letters into the record in opposition of the House Republican Farm Bill from the American Federation of Teachers, the National Education Association, AFL-CIO, and AFSCME. All letters disapprove of the nearly $30 billion cut to SNAP. Thank you. And with that, I would yield 2 minutes to the gentlelady from Ohio, Ms. Brown.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Rep. Hayes for organizing the special order hour on SNAP. Today I rise because tomorrow the House Ag Committee will vote on the GOP's partisan farm bill. If passed, it will force severe cuts to the SNAP program that would risk benefits for years to come. SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, formerly known as food stamps, is a vital resource to families and individuals who have fallen on hard times. In Ohio's 11th Congressional District, almost 1 in 4 households rely on SNAP benefits to put food on the table. These are our friends, our family, neighbors, and my constituents. It shouldn't be controversial to want members of your community fed. On the House Ag Committee, I am committed to making that known, but this farm bill will see the largest cut to SNAP benefits in over 30 years, taking nearly $30 billion in food out of the mouths of people who really need it. Being poor isn't a condemnation of morals, but Republicans have shown they want to treat it that way, which is why I urge my Republican colleagues to reconsider their extreme proposal and to join Democrats as we continue to put people over politics. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentlelady from Pennsylvania, Representative Wild, for 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm grateful to the gentlelady from Connecticut for convening us this evening to discuss an issue that affects every corner of our nation, food insecurity. In blue, red, and purple districts alike, too many families struggle to afford the food that they need to keep themselves and their families healthy and fed. Throughout my time in Congress, I have used my voice and my vote to support nutrition programs because I am determined to ensure that in our nation, the richest in the history of the world, no one goes hungry. As part of this effort, I have prioritized key nutrition programs. In 2018, my very first vote was to reauthorize the Farm Bill, which funds many critical nutrition assistance programs that people in our community rely on. These programs include the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, known as SNAP, Meals on Wheels, Women, Infants, and Children, nutrition assistance, school breakfast programs, and summer meal programs. Now, extreme members of the House have put forward a farm bill that includes devastating cuts for SNAP participants that so many in our community rely on to feed their families. Their proposed bill would cut nearly $30 billion in SNAP benefits that families rely on to put food on the table every night. In 2023, 1 in 8 households, roughly 44.2 million Americans, experience food insecurity or lack of access to an affordable, nutritious diet. In my district, Pennsylvania 7, the greater Lehigh Valley area, nearly 40,000 households, or 13% of the households in our community, rely on SNAP to feed themselves and their families. In the richest nation in the world, no one should go to bed hungry because they can't afford to eat. And no one should have to worry about having enough food for their kids because politicians decided to play games with the necessary benefits that they rely on every single day. This is a moral imperative of the highest priority. Children's physical and cognitive development depends on proper nutrition. Quite simply, adequate food sets them up for success in school and throughout life. We must not abandon families in our communities that struggle with food insecurity. This should not be a partisan issue, and it is deeply disappointing to me that members on the other side of the aisle would put forth a bill that so severely cuts SNAP benefits. I will always stand up to efforts to strip benefits away from the most vulnerable members of our society, children. And I hope to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle on a bipartisan path forward that protects critical nutrition programs, including SNAP, in the upcoming Farm Bill reauthorization. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Wild, for those powerful words. I now recognize the gentlelady from Illinois, Representative Chakowski, for 2 minutes.
Let me thank my colleague, Congresswoman Hayes, for bringing us together today to talk about something so important. We do live in the richest country in the world at the richest moment in history. And the very idea that we would tolerate and even think about adding to hunger in America is beyond belief. It is a moral issue, but it's also, how could we even think about cutting the opportunity for our children, for our families, for older Americans, for people with disabilities, for people who simply can't afford to put food on the table? This is not because we have a shortage of the food that is available. It is not because there is not the funding to make sure that we take care of those in need. This is the beginning, pretty soon, of the hunger season, I say, because many schools now that have provided school lunch programs, school breakfast programs, may not be working at that in the months to come over the summer. And yet these children and families need to eat. And so I just say, how can anyone think about cutting the SNAP program? 60 million people in the United States, half of whom are children. No, it is just not tolerable. And so I just beg that we are going to make sure that everyone in the United States of America who is hungry will have food on the table, and I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentleman from California, Representative Vargas, for 2 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, I sincerely thank the gentlewoman from Connecticut for bringing us together tonight to defend the SNAP program. In America, no child should go to bed hungry. No family should have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. SNAP is the most important and effective tool we have to stave off hunger in our country. It is our first line of defense. And yet, House Republicans have proposed the largest cut to the program in decades. This is cruel, plain and simple. These proposed cuts stand to harm more than 40,000 families in my district, California, and over 40 million families nationwide who benefit from this program. Almost 80% of the people who benefit from SNAP are children, seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans. SNAP also boosts our local economies. Every dollar spent on SNAP benefits generates roughly $1.50 in economic activity. For too many people in our country, making ends meet is a daily battle. Programs like SNAP are vital tools for ending hunger and helping those who are most in need. They provide Americans with help they need to find the footing in tough times and to make life better for themselves and their children. We should be expanding these programs, not cutting them. With that, I yield back. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to add that $18 billion of the cuts would affect households with children, which in a typical month would include nearly 17 million children. And with that, I'd like to recognize the gentlelady from California, Representative Barragan, for 2 minutes.
Thank you to the gentlelady. I ask Americans, are you a disabled veteran that receives food assistance or SNAP? How about a part-time college student or single mom on SNAP? Know that House Republicans are coming after your food benefits. House Republicans' Farm Bill would make the largest cut to SNAP in food assistance program in 30 years. Many American families are on the brink. They rely on SNAP to put food on the table. 86% of all SNAP benefits go to households that have children, or households with older Americans, or individuals with disabilities. As chair of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, I'm also concerned about the harm SNAP cuts will bring to communities of color, including Latinos. 40% of Latino adults report not having enough food to eat, more than any other ethnic or racial group. Over 5 million Latinos in the United States receive SNAP to put food on the table. Right now, a single person will receive at most $9 in SNAP assistance for food per day. To those in need, $9 can determine whether they can eat that day. 3 square meals a day should not be a partisan debate. Without SNAP, hungry Americans will be forced to choose between food to eat and necessities like electricity, running water, or medication. It's a cruel and inhumane choice we should not force on the American people. House Democrats will continue to fight to preserve and expand access to SNAP so that no family goes hungry. I urge my Republican colleagues to put people over politics and join House Democrats to protect SNAP. We must stand together for compassion, dignity, and the well-being of all Americans. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. I'd like to add into the record that $9 billion of the cuts would affect households with preschool-age children or children under 5, which in a typical month would include about 5 million young children. I now recognize the gentlelady from Michigan, Representative Tlaib.
Thank you so much for my wonderful, amazing, dedicated, committed colleague from Connecticut who is today, as we say in Detroit, speaking truth to power when it comes to our most vulnerable in the United States. We've heard it over and over again, but we are in the richest country in the world. Millions of children, even though we live in the richest country, millions of children live in poverty, lacking access to necessities like food, housing, and health care. It's shameful. More than 44 million people in our country face hunger, including over 15% in one of the largest counties in my district, Wayne County. SNAP is essential food assistance program that has been a key tool in combating hunger in our most vulnerable communities. Now, my Republican colleagues want to cut this essential program that so many of our families rely on to feed their children. Shameful. The GOP Farm Bill would make the largest cut to SNAP in nearly 30 years. The bill threatens $27 billion in SNAP benefits for low-income families. It's utterly shameful. We must stand together strongly in support of expanding the social safety net and increasing funding programs like for SNAP and other child nutrition programs. These are essential in creating healthy, thriving communities. It is time to protect programs to combat hunger, not make extremist cuts. Working families in our country should not have to worry about where their next meal is coming from. In this body, we see it over and over again that we seem to find money for endless wars like this, but we can't seem to find the same resources to end child hunger in our country. You know, the first African-American woman ever to serve in a Congress was Shirley Chisholm, and she used to say, "Children can't learn if they're hungry." Well, children should and must have access to SNAP benefits to experience long-term positive outcomes like better health, improved learning, and higher success as adults. I don't think people realize the trauma of what people in our most vulnerable, and it's just not only our children, but our most vulnerable among us, the trauma they go through in going to sleep hungry. Access to nutrition meals is essential for every child's health and development. We know this. So why make these extremist cuts? We must continue to invest in universal school meals and so much more. I'm proud to co-sponsor the Universal Schools Meals Program and proud to say to all of my folks in the 12th Congressional District, I'm not going to back down. I'm not going to back down until we fully fund the SNAP benefits. It's the least we can do, Mr. Speaker, in this Congress. It's not just our children. It's our disabled neighbors. It's our seasoned residents. It's our veterans, working class, folks that are working hours and hours a day and still can't put food on the table. We must do better. Thank you again to my colleague in Connecticut for bringing us together today to discuss the importance of protecting SNAP. I yield.
Thank you. $5 billion of the cuts will affect older adults. That would affect households which means in a typical month, that would include more than 6 million individuals age 60 or older whose benefits would be cut. I now recognize the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Jackson, for 4 minutes.
Thank you, the Honorable Congresswoman Johanna Hayes from the great state of Connecticut. Mr. Speaker, I rise because it is an imperative that this body move with all deliberate speed to pass a farm bill that is both responsible and enriching for the American people. The Farm Bill is one of the most fundamental pieces of legislation that we enact as a government, and not simply because of the dollars we dedicate, but more so because of the amount of people who are supported by the passing of this indispensable law. Unlike most of the bills we pass, the Farm Bill is not a dry and depersonalized legislative act. There are names and faces attached to food. There are real people in dire situations associated and connected to the success of this bill. Unlike most of the appropriations we allocate in this body, the Farm Bill is a moral document that reminds us that we owe each other as human beings. It brings us back to the fundamental things. It reminds us that politics of the future means nothing in the stomach of a child who is hungry. And to be sure, this bill compels us to move forward. This bill moves us beyond politics of blame so that we might embrace a more excellent way. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the Farm Bill is one of the few manifestations of the social contract this government makes with the American people. The SNAP program alone is a moral accomplishment that we have to reach for. Over 300,000 people make up my district in Illinois. Almost 73,000 of those households receive SNAP benefits. Almost 40% of these households have a child in them, and almost 45% of those children have some sort of disability. In fact, I would go so far as to say that the bill is one of the few manifestations of the social contract of this government that the American people deserve. The SNAP program alone is our moral achievement. And I say this because all of us know that 86% of the SNAP benefits go to the household of women and children. Mr. Speaker, we have to move with speed. Ask not what you can do for your country, but what your country can do for you. Let me tell you, there's a mutuality in this contract. We also have to understand that the state has to support the people, not simply the people, the state. The Farm Bill helps those that are in need when their backs are against the wall. Does this bill achieve that? No, Mr. Speaker. Taking food off of children's plates is not the best of the American ideal. We say our prayers, but we pray for the food we're about to receive. We do not pray for the food that has now been removed from our table by our government. We must indeed fight for the rights of all those women and children, disabled families that need our help. This is important because the time when we ignore cities and emerging farming centers is over. In the district that I represent, we celebrate community gardens and urban farms because in as much as I believe that access to healthy food is a right that all human beings should enjoy, it is also a responsibility that each of us must make and take into our own hands. Each of us must do whatever we can to ensure that our families have the sustenance and nutrition that we require for a flourishing and the possibility of a great life. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to say in closing, we need a farm bill that is responsible, taking food out of the mouths of the most desperate and those that are the least, the lost, and the left behind cannot stand. I will be opposing this farm bill until it is more responsive and we leave SNAP alone and ensure that every family is well fed in America. I yield back my time. I thank the Honorable Congresswoman Johanna Hayes for picking up this fight.
Thank you, Representative Jackson. We appreciate everything you said, and thank you for your words. I now recognize the gentleman from Mississippi and the chairman of the House Democratic Nutrition Task Force, Representative Thompson. Benny G. Thompson.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the gentleladies giving me some time. First of all, I'm one of those members who represent a significantly agricultural district who actually has its economy based on agriculture. I also represent the district that former Congressman Jamie Whitten represented, and ultimately he framed the Farm Bill in such that it did not pit rural America against urban America. This bill pits rural America against urban America, and that's not the purpose of a farm bill. And let's talk a little bit about it. You can't penalize the needy for the greedy. And what I'm saying in that respect is so many of people in this country are in need of nutrition benefits. That's why we have a farm bill. A substantial majority of the farm bill is devoted to nutrition, and rightfully so. So let's talk a little bit about where I am with it. Former Congressman, several Congresspeople. This is my fourth farm bill. I've gone through all of it. I've seen everything that's been had with it. But the important part is I serve as the chair of the 21st Century Agriculture and Nutrition Task Force, appointed by Leader Jeffries. We went all over the country. We heard from people saying, look, there are important things for the Farm Bill, but it's all about compromise and working together. So what did we hear people say? First thing they said, that food is medicine. If you're worried about health care in this country, if people don't have nutrition, that is a problem. Today, the cost of food is steadily rising, which means Americans cannot afford to purchase healthy, nutritious meals. In going around the country, there were a number of things that we heard from east, west, north, south. It said we must not eliminate the hot food ban for SNAP recipients. SNAP recipients should have the benefit of hot meals. We must address the hunger among college students. We should protect SNAP against harmful cuts to eligibility requirements. Now, you talk about eligibility requirements. Most people don't know that if you are on Social Security and Medicare, that counts against seniors' eligibility for SNAP benefits. But also in doing that and looking at it, veterans are also penalized in the qualification for SNAP's benefits. But we also have those individuals who have made a mistake, they've come out, but they're ineligible for SNAP benefits. We always talk about second chance people. So why shouldn't formerly incarcerated people be eligible for food stamps? Those are things that we heard. But more importantly, this $30 billion cut, totally unreasonable. It makes no sense. And again, it puts and penalizes people over politics. I hope when this issue is taken up, Ms. Hayes, tomorrow, Democrats will stand firm in its opposition against it. If Republicans are genuinely interested in making this work, we can do that. But from the nutrition standpoint, don't penalize people who need help. The demonstration of their help is already here. I look forward, after this issue is defeated, coming back together, pulling people together, working through all the logistics, and not be cute about how we fund certain programs and defund other programs. Ms. Hayes, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I just want to amplify the point that we have to have a farm bill that works for everyone. I often hear people say that we need a farm bill that represents farmers. I would challenge that we need a farm bill that represents everyone. Members often ask me, do you represent a farming community? And my response is, we all represent communities where people eat, and that has to be a part of the conversation as well. I now recognize the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Representative Presley, for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Congresswoman Hayes. Before we began this special order hour, I approached Congresswoman Hayes to thank her for her leadership in pulling this together. And she said, "You're welcome, but I'm so sorry we have to do this at all. As am I, as are we all. Such a shame. But I thank you for your leadership and partnership in our fight to eradicate hunger and for convening us this evening." Mr. Speaker, I rise in solidarity with the over 50,000 SNAP beneficiaries in the Massachusetts 7th Congressional District, as well as the 41 million plus across our country. Parents who choose to go hungry because there isn't enough to feed both themselves and their children. And they would rather make that sacrifice rather than threaten the cognitive development and nutrition that their children need to thrive, and certainly to support their readiness to learn. I rise in solidarity with those families who, given the high cost of housing and food, are struggling because incomes are not keeping pace. Mr. Speaker, food insecurity is on the rise, but it doesn't have to be. Congress should not advance a farm bill that cuts $30 billion in SNAP funding. Now, to be clear, we are not here due to a deficit of resources for SNAP. We are here due to a deficit of empathy, a deficit of empathy for those who are food insecure, a lack of empathy for our most vulnerable and marginalized neighbors. This Republican cut to our nation's largest nutrition program will disproportionately harm our seniors, veterans, children, adults with disabilities, and working families. In my home state of Massachusetts, this cut will impact 1 in 6 residents, over 1 million people who depend on SNAP to put healthy food on the table. That alarming statistic is worse for Black and Latino families who are twice as likely to face food insecurity. For decades, SNAP has been a critical tool in reducing hunger for low-income people, lifting millions out of poverty, and improving health and well-being. To make it plain, food is medicine. Food is life. We should not tolerate the suffering of our neighbors as they live in anxiety and fear, wondering where their next meal will come from. Republicans need to stop playing with people's lives. Hunger is a humanitarian crisis, a moral failing, and a policy choice. I urge my colleagues to choose compassion and care over cruelty and callousness and support full funding of SNAP. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you, Representative Presley. And I would like to just add that children and some of our most vulnerable communities don't have lobbyists, but they do have members of Congress, and it is our job to make sure that we are actively working to improve their lives. With that, I recognize the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Representative Omar, for 1 minute.
Thank you so much, Representative Hayes, for your tireless effort. And yes, you are right. Children, the poor, the elderly, and the downtrodden do not have lobbyists, but they have us. Mr. Speaker, I rise in opposition to Chairman Thompson's partisan farm bill. Hunger is rising at an alarming rate among U.S. households. In Minnesota alone, over 500,000 people are facing hunger, including over 180,000 children. SNAP serves as the first line of defense against hunger for children, for the elderly, for veterans, for those who have disabilities. Yet last week, Republicans unveiled the largest cuts to SNAP in nearly 30 years. This extreme proposal would slash SNAP funding, which provides food benefits for low-income families, by approximately $30 billion over the next decade, impacting every participant. And instead of proposing this unacceptable policy, we should be passing My Universal School Meals program. We should be fully funding SNAP. We should be fully funding WIC. Enacting this bill without dramatic changes would push more people below the poverty line and exacerbate hunger. I urge my colleagues to reject this proposal and prioritize our constituents' over making political points. And I yield back.
Thank you. I would also like to add that in 2023, 1.2 million veterans participated in the SNAP program. I really don't understand why in this Congress, whenever we have to make tough policy choices, these are the people that are always targeted. Last year, during the debt ceiling negotiations, the program that was targeted and cut was SNAP and nutrition programs. In September, when we went back for the appropriations budget, the program and the hard lines that were targeted were once again feeding and nutrition programs. When will this end? At this point, I recognize the gentlelady from Vermont, Representative Ballant, for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much. You have been a champion on this issue, and I'm so glad you've convened us here tonight. Look, over 41 million Americans depend on nutrition assistance to feed themselves and their families. And SNAP benefits reach millions of rural Americans every day. No state, no community, no congressional district in our nation is immune to hunger and food insecurity. And paradoxically, in rural areas that grow most of our nation's food, many households face real struggles with hunger. It's not just in metropolitan areas. And we know poverty is the root cause of hunger, and it's often acute in rural communities, like in my home state of Vermont, with 15% of households in rural areas facing food insecurity. Millions of working families, veterans, people with disabilities, seniors, children in rural communities cannot always afford enough food to keep themselves and their families healthy. Simply put, too many Americans are going hungry every day. But we have a vital program that actually helps to address this problem, the SNAP program. It provides monthly benefits to low-income families and individuals to help them to buy food. Now, Republicans attack, and it's just the latest attack on this essential program, would slash the program by $30 billion over the next decade. If enacted, the bill would make the largest cuts to SNAP benefits in 30 years, at a time when we have gross wealth inequality in this country. Slashing anti-hunger programs that we know work is stupid. It's inhumane. And it's also short-sighted. Even if you don't think we have a moral responsibility to feed the children of this nation and make sure they don't go hungry every night, even if you don't think it's a moral imperative, which I do, but if you don't, there are real consequences for individual Americans and for our healthcare system. When Americans don't have enough food, this greatly impacts the health of those who go hungry. Food insecurity can lead to type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, obesity. The gentlewoman from Connecticut and I are both former teachers. We know children who go hungry struggle in school. They have health problems. Americans who are food insecure are more likely to struggle with psychological and behavioral health issues. This year's Farm Bill should be providing more benefits to Americans. We should be expanding and protecting SNAP benefits. Instead, what are we doing? Once again, demonizing the poor. It's time that House Republicans drop their partisan extremism and work alongside Democrats to pass a truly bipartisan farm bill and actually help feed the American people. I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Ballant. As my colleague stated, she and I are both former educators, and I really wish that before members of Congress cast their vote on these cuts to programs like SNAP, that they were forced to sit in a classroom on a Tuesday morning after a long weekend and count the number of kids who had their heads down on their desks. I wish that members were forced to sit in a classroom on any given day as a kid said they had a headache, third period, and you realize it's because they haven't had breakfast. I wish that members of Congress were forced to stand with you at the after-school program when a kid hung behind and asked if they could take something home for their little brother who's been home all day and they know they haven't eaten. I wish every member of Congress and everyone in this chamber were forced to do that before these proposals were put into a bill like the Farm Bill and before members voted on these things. And with that, I recognize the gentlelady from Michigan, Representative Stevens, for 2 minutes.
Thank you to my good colleague, the gentlewoman from Connecticut. And I reflect on this Farm Bill from a standpoint that at this period in time, Americans are paying more of their earned income for food than they have in the last 30 years. Our president's FTC chair has notified us that grocery stores, big grocers, some food manufacturers, but mostly the grocers, are price gouging. If you are middle class, if you are poor, if you are trying to save for college for your kid, if you are trying to save up for an unexpected occurrence, food is squeezing the middle class and working families of this country. And we have a responsibility to pass a farm bill that addresses the needs of the hungry and addresses the needs of our middle class. We have got to get real. Because what we do is we say, oh, you know what, we're going to cap you at this income level. And if you're a single mom and you're raising your kid and you're $500 over that income level, you don't get the SNAP benefits. I am sick of this type of governance. I am sick of this type of means testing. We did this in the pandemic. It wasn't hard. Steve Mnuchin, you know, he was able to give everybody a capped unemployment level. But when it comes to food, and you got a Democratic caucus over here fighting over and over and over again. Free and reduced lunch in our schools. Thank you to the governor from Michigan for actually getting that done. We'd like to see that here in the United States of America. This is real stuff. And kids are going to school hungry, and kids are ashamed when they're carrying in those meal cards. And parents are worried. And so you know what we've got? We've got over $1 trillion of credit card debt. Because people can't go to the grocery store. They can't take their kids out to eat because it costs $50 for a family of 4. You can't get lunch for under $15. So what are we litigating here? You know, just filling the pockets of the grocers and the big business and the this and the that when we don't actually have a real North Star here in this chamber? Just one last fact. The maximum benefits of SNAP right now fell 19% short of covering basic meal costs. One study revealed that in 98% of counties, SNAP benefits did not cover the cost of a modestly priced meal. So we're not even meeting the bare minimum, my friends. We're not even doing the bare minimum. And the House Democrats are going to continue to stand up to this wrong-minded package that will not be serving the American people. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't help but reflect on the irony of us hearing every day about inflation and the rising costs of food and basic things that people need, while also proposing cuts to the most vulnerable people on an anti-hunger, anti-poverty program. I now recognize the newest member of our Democratic caucus, Representative Tim Kennedy, the gentleman from New York. You are recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking Congresswoman Hayes for leading this effort. Mr. Speaker, on behalf of the 62,000 households in New York's 26th congressional district that rely on the SNAP program, I rise to urge my colleagues to oppose the changes in the Thrifty Food Program and the Farm Bill. In New York State alone, these cuts would result in the loss of $2 billion in SNAP benefits over 10 years and the loss of over $3.5 billion in total local economic activity. At a time when overall food insecurity in New York State has increased from 11.4% to 13.5%, And child food insecurity increased from 15.4% to 18.8%. The absolute last thing we should be doing is cutting SNAP benefits. These changes to the Thrifty Food Program will negatively impact benefit levels for summer EBT and funding for food banks. This is simply unacceptable. Instead, Congress should pass legislation to expand access to SNAP. That's why I co-sponsor the Enhance Access to SNAP Act, which would eliminate work for food requirements and expand benefits for millions of college students. In my district, our primary food bank, Feed More, Western New York, has seen the need for food assistance in the community triple since the pandemic. And the number of people served today has already exceeded 10-year growth projections. As a nation, we have an obligation to eradicate hunger. This bill will do just the opposite. I urge my colleagues to oppose this legislation as written. I yield back.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentlelady from New Mexico and the leader on the Rules Committee, Representative Leisure Fernandez.
Thank you.
For 3 minutes, I'm sorry. For 3 minutes.
Thank you so very much, Representative Hayes, for organizing and for giving me this time, because I am here on behalf of my good friend and the ranking member of the Rules Committee, Jim McGovern, who Republicans silenced today for simply telling the truth about a criminal trial. Imagine that. On this House floor, we cannot state a fact about a trial. Here is another fact about the former president that represents a policy choice Democrats oppose. President Trump supported cutting SNAP by nearly 30% within 10 years. Mr. McGovern stands for the opposite. He stands up every week on this House floor with this poster, "End Hunger Now." If Republicans hadn't silenced him, he would have spoken tonight against the Farm Bill because of its impact on farmers. If Republicans hadn't silenced him, he would have spoken up for families who do not have enough food to eat. Similar to me, Mr. McGovern represents a district that includes thousands of farms and farmers who benefit from SNAP because they sell their produce into the program, but also farmers need to use SNAP because they don't make enough money. So we are starving the people who are raising the food for us. Mr. McGovern, like me, represents a district where, in my district actually, 1 in 5 New Mexicans received SNAP benefits, the highest of any state. This Republican majority silenced him. So I'm here to read the remarks that the Republican majority might not want to hear from Mr. McGovern. These are his remarks. Mr. Speaker, Republicans are advancing a bill that cuts SNAP, our nation's first line of defense against hunger, by an astounding $30 million. He would have probably raised his hands and said, "You can't make this up." MAGA Republicans included a provision in their extremely partisan farm bill that will prevent SNAP benefits from ever being increased, even if a scientific review says they should be. The last reevaluation in 2021, which was the first update in 50 years, gave families an extra, wait for it, $1.40 per person per day to purchase food. That extra help has meant families can access more nutritious food. It has meant fewer skipped meals. It has meant better food security. Mr. Speaker, I urge all of my colleagues to oppose this MAGA Republican farm bill, which would cut future benefits and increase hunger for kids, seniors, people with disabilities, and other vulnerable adults. Those are Jim McGovern's remarks. While House Republicans silenced him today, they will never silence the truth that he speaks. We must end hunger now. We must answer the call. When I was hungry, you gave me to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me to drink. Thank you, Representative Jahana Hayes, for your advocacy in bringing us together to heed this call.
Thank you. I now recognize the gentleman from New York, Representative Goldman, for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much to my colleague from Connecticut. I rise today alongside so many of my colleagues to make one thing very clear. Republicans' proposed funding cuts to SNAP are unconscionable and will send millions into poverty and food insecurity. SNAP is an essential lifeline that working families across America rely on to put food on the table. In New York City alone, where I come from, more than 1.7 million people rely on SNAP benefits to help them feed their families. Nationwide, there are more than 41 million SNAP recipients. According to the Center for Budget and Policy Priorities, 92% of SNAP benefits go to households with income below the poverty line, and a shocking 54% go to households at or below half of the poverty line. So it begs the question, what do my colleagues on the other side of the aisle have against working families doing their best to succeed? Do you not care if our children go without food? It is just simply unacceptable. Food is a basic necessity. In the wealthiest country in the world, it should not even be a question whether our government is going to make sure that everyone, especially innocent children, have basic necessities. Our budgets show where our priorities lie. So let's reverse these draconian cuts to SNAP. Let's not cut taxes on the wealthy, and let's put our families and our children first. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you. I'd like to take a moment to thank all of my colleagues who participated in tonight's SNAP special order. And I'd like to just close by saying that these cuts will affect summer EBT, which is how most families feed their children over the summer, by $500 million in this Farm Bill. I'm not really sure if there's a full appreciation of who is affected by these cuts. I've been very transparent about my story in the fact that I grew up in a household that received food stamps. As a young college student and a single mom, I was working 2 jobs, attending community college, and still qualified for benefits. I promise you that my story is the same as every single member of Congress, a constituent in the district of every single member of Congress who just wants a shot, who just wants a chance at raising their children with dignity, who just wants a chance at moving their family from poverty into being contributors to society. Every single one of you has someone in your district just like me. Hundreds of families going through the same thing. Working families that'll be affected by the $11 billion in cuts that would affect their household and their earnings. I urge my Republican colleagues to rethink these proposals, to come back to the table and let us work on a bipartisan farm bill that helps everybody in America. Of all the things that we can say that we've done, I don't want taking food out of the mouths of children to be one of them. Tomorrow, we'll go into a markup on this farm bill, and we will review it title by title. There are 12 titles. The Thrifty Food Plan, which is what much of us have spoken about tonight, which is the mathematical system by which benefits are evaluated and based upon, was moved from Title IV, which is the nutrition title, to Title 12, miscellaneous and others. Nutrition is not miscellaneous. It is something that should be a priority in this country. It is something that we have the ability to do. Once again, it is a policy choice. I held out until I saw the text because I prayed about it and I hoped and I wished that the cuts were not as bad as I had read about in the papers and heard talk about, but they are. $30 billion in cuts are devastating to a program that is the most effective anti-hunger program that we have. I urge my colleagues to really consider their votes on this farm bill and the impact that it'll have on children and families. And with that, I yield back.
Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 9th,